Kia ora, good evening. Police say a young boy was lucky to walk away after being hit by a car outside an Invercargill school this afternoon. An almost 4-year-old boy was struck by a vehicle outside middle school at around 3:10 after he took off from his mother and ran across the road in front of a vehicle. Constable Brooke Armishaw says the boy was lucky not to have been injured. Police are wanting to speak to the driver of the older model silver BMW who stopped and told witnesses he was going to look for a park but did not return. Police are also say it serves as a reminder to drivers to take real caution around schools. A house fire in Invercargill in the early hours of this morning had the potential to be a tragedy, according to the fire service. Firefighters were called to this Maitland Street house just after 3 a.m. The 3 occupants had evacuated safely and a man was taken to hospital suffering from smoke inhalation. Around half the house was extensively damaged by the fire, believed to have been caused by hot ashes in an adjacent carport. Senior Station Officer Colin Russell says while the family had taken good safety precautions and a smoke alarm was installed, the battery had not been inserted properly, so it did not activate. Naming rights for the rebuild of Stadium Southland have been sold for more than $1 million, but more funding is still needed to complete the project. A deal with the Invercargill Licensing Trust and the Southern Institute of Technology will see the ILT have naming rights for the stadium, while SIT picks up naming rights for the velodrome. The deal is worth $1.4 million. Despite the extra funding, there's still an estimated shortfall of around $1.5 million. Southland Indoor Leisure Centre Charitable Trust Chairman Acton Smith says it's a relief to have the funding secured, with the committee working to sell naming rights since last July.
I think simply when you're dealing with the naming rights, you're selling a commercial property, and you've got commercial contracts to go through and a lot of legal things finally to be tied up. It's just the nature of selling something commercially like that.
So if you hadn't secured this funding, was there a plan B, or what would you have done?
We were living in hope, I think, was very clearly what we were doing. Yes, we did have a plan B, but it would have meant, I think, that ultimately we'd have had a lot of debt for the city on the stadium, which is something we're trying not to have. We think if we can open this in a debt-free manner, it will be a great outcome. But we've still got a shortfall, as you know now.
So you do have a shortfall of around $1.5 million. Yes. What are you doing to try and find that?
Well, we haven't got certainty on that yet, and that's the thing I have to stress. The insurance company and ourselves have been trying to meet since November last year to deal with what we call the core block in the stadium, which is the bit that's broken and now being replaced. That's the one thing that's really, we haven't got any definite answer on that. We're still awaiting on the engineer's report for that. The insurance company are, then it goes to our engineer, then we can give an answer of how much we're short. But we don't know. But our best guess and our estimate at the moment is about $1.5 million.
Now, for the stadium, there had been a possible date estimated for a finish of October. Is that still on track?
Call it November. Please give us the benefit of the time. But certainly if we're going to be ready next year.
Invercargill Licensing Trust Chair Alan Dennis says the ILT has also contributed an additional $3.9 million in funding to the rebuild.
This is all actually coming from the ILT business. We looked over the next 2 or 3 years, and Greg Mulvey and Neil Affleck have convinced us that we're able to afford that without affecting our donations. So some a little bit out of reserve, but some of our business commitments I suppose will be slightly less.
So in terms of other community groups or organisations, will they be missing out with this money now going to the stadium?
That's a good question, and that's one that our board was very, very concerned about. So the short answer is no. We've structured things in such a way that we're able to maintain that level of support. With the ILT Foundation, it may be a little bit more difficult because obviously the amount of gaming money coming through the system is slightly less. But the ILT level of donations over next year or 2 or 3 will not be affected.
Milford Road has reopened after being closed for 31 days. The road was closed on May 23rd due to unstable rock posing a safety risk to road users. It was reopened at lunchtime yesterday following confirmation that the blast site of an unstable section of rock is now stable enough to allow traffic through. NZTA Southland Area Manager Peter Robinson says the reopening is great news for the local community and tourism operators who have had a tough few weeks while the road has been closed. The road will open between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. through winter. Stay with us after the break. A push for Queenstown to diversify its tourism routes. Welcome back. It's been a tough few years for tourism in Queenstown, not helped by the global economy, the Japanese tsunami or ash cloud in South America. But it appears the tide is turning. Peak seasons are doing well, but there's a push for the tourist town to diversify its offerings to maintain its top. Queenstown is paving the way for more visitors, with indications the tourist town is turning the corner on a bumpy few years. At times, the tourist Mecca's population can swell to 80,000, almost tripling the normal volume of residents, but shoulder seasons can leave the town deserted. This year, up to 20% more flights are expected through Queenstown Airport's new international terminal, bringing much-needed tourist dollars to the local economy. Currently, half the planes landing at Frankton arrive directly from Auckland, and Queenstown Airport Chief Executive Scott Patterson says it's proving a convenient travel alliance for Chinese tourists.
Auckland Airport is a big promoter of the Chinese market, and so Auckland is our gateway to China. So any Auckland flight, we treat it as a domestic flight, but you look at the passenger mix on that flight and it's obvious they're not all Aucklanders.
And while the Asian arrivals remain strong, the Trans-Tasman market is also building.
We're seeing Brisbane, Melbourne and particularly strong, and Sydney, so East Coast Australia only.
Indications are the challenges of recent years are lessening, with bed numbers in the town up, according to Queenstown's Tourism Industry Association Chair Penny Clark.
The marketplace in the last 6 months has certainly turned, and I think an element of that has been the Chinese that are certainly helping pick the numbers up.
But she says the tourist town must diversify its offering outside adventure-based activities to build on its success moving forward.
The secret, of course, to the future for Queenstown now is our convention centre that we're working hard to get, because, of course, at the moment, you could say all our eggs are in one basket. We rely on the leisure market and we desperately need to share that around with the corporates and get some convention business in town.
Queenstown Lakes District Mayor Vanessa Van Uden agrees a convention centre could mitigate shoulder season effects while increasing the town's offering as a destination for conferences and incentive tours.
I think probably the biggest one in the offing at the moment is trying to make progress on a convention centre. We've noticed over the years, the last few years, there's been less of a shoulder season, but it is still there. So typically we have a shoulder season between summer and winter, and then winter and summer, where the town goes very quiet. So what we're trying to do is look at ways to actually even things out over the whole year.
Anne says there are plenty of advantages to the town investing in infrastructure to support business tourism.
What they do is bring an awful lot of visitors to town that stay for a longer period of time and are higher value, so the commercial and the accommodation sector get an ongoing benefit out of it, which is what you do the investment up front for.
Competing in the business tourism market could prove to be more lucrative than current adventure-based offerings. Queenstown Lakes District Council says work is underway with a preferred supplier and are hopeful firm plans will be revealed by the end of July. Margot Southland, South Today News. H&J Smith has lodged a demolition consent for its appliance building on Esk Street in Invercargill to make way for a new and improved outdoor world. H&J Smith Chief Executive John Green says the demolition on the multi-building site is necessary as the current building doesn't meet modern construction standards and would require strengthening. He says the project will take up to 6 months but would not comment on what the cost may be. H&J Smith Director Acton Smith says Outdoor World is long overdue a refit, and the relocation will provide an opportunity for a full refurbishment. The Southland SPCA Animal Ark redevelopment is on track despite minor setbacks caused by the weather. Despite the weather causing some hiccups, the $1.9 million project is still on track and the new building is expected to be operational in 6 months' time. Although the ongoing construction work has meant a loss of outdoor space for the animals and a need to move buildings, SPCA staff and animal occupants are coping well. Shelter manager Mary Bradley says the new shelter will provide a more secure environment for both animals and staff.
Apart from the mud and the wet, pretty well, I think. We've had to shift some buildings, which put a bit of pressure on us, and we lost a couple of puppy play areas, but I think we're coping pretty well.
What will this mean for the shelter in the future? Will you have a greater animal capacity, or...?
It's not about taking more animals, it's about looking after the ones that we will have in a warmer, more hygienic, safer environment, which will also be great for the volunteers and my staff.
Members of the Southland Sharks joined city officials at the weekend to open the new basketball court in South City. The South Alive initiative was opened by Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt and ILT Chair Alan Dennis alongside the team, with speeches, the cutting of a ceremonial ribbon and a barbecue. Celebrations also included basketball games between the Sharks and public. South Alive Child, Youth and Engagement convener Adam Lilly said with a turnout of around 60 people, the opening had been a success. He hoped South Alive could eventually use the court to set up weekend social teams. Coming up in sport, highlights of the third test between the All Blacks and France. That's after the weather next. Good night.